Good evening again, everyone. My name is Chris Weismeyer. I'm the Director of Admissions for UCCS. Thank you all for joining us this evening. You can see I am joined by two others, and I'll have them introduce themselves here first, or here in just a second. But you do see that agenda again in front of you. We're going to cover these big picture topics this evening with some specific comments made about the subpoints there. We think that's probably the most questions that you're all curious about right now. I think the biggest thing that we hope to get across tonight is the assurance that we're always monitoring the situation, that we are moving towards an in-person experience as much as we possibly can. And I think you will find a lot of that assurance tonight with the comments that Stephanie and Chuck will make. We do have the chat and Q&A open, but I do ask you to please hold off on submitting any questions until we get through these topics, because I do think they're going to cover a lot of those big picture things you're really curious about. The Q&A, we would ask you to put your questions into. We saved the chat to send you all updates and announcements so that you can see like links and things like that. So for example, there's an orientation link already in the chat. If you have not signed up for orientation yet, orientation is the way that that students quote unquote commit to UCCS. We do not have an official enrollment deposit or anything like that. But we do take that as like when you sign up for orientation, that is you telling us you're coming to UCCS. So we'll use the chat to send announcements to you, but when the time is right, please submit your questions to the Q&A. So I'm going to turn my camera off in just a second, but I would first like to start with our panelists. Stephanie Hanenberg. Stephanie, would you mind introducing yourself, your role at UCCS, how long you've been here, and kind of all the other important information that folks need to know about you?
Sure, thanks, Chris. I'm Stephanie Hanenberg. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Health and Wellness at UCCS. I oversee our campus recreation, our health services, mental health services, wellness promotion, nutrition, and our disability services. I did formally oversee our residence life and housing as well, so I'll be hitting on some of those. I'm one of our medical providers. I have been on campus 16 years, almost. I'm a two-time UCCS alum and a mom of two kids that successfully completed college, so I have that perspective as well. Welcome, everyone.
And Chuck, please.
My name is Chuck Litchfield. I'm the Vice Chancellor of Administration and Finance. I am also the COVID incident team lead. So I've been leading our response to COVID for now about 14 months. I've been at UCCS for 3 years. I came from Stanford University. I'm also an alum of the business school. I got my MBA there. And I have a son who is finishing his freshman year as a computer engineering major. So I feel like I've got both the alumni connection and a son going through all this. You want me to just go ahead and roll right into the agenda, Chris?
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks.
Okay. So first, let me just say that I'm going to talk about the vaccine guidelines and the processes, and I know there are a lot of questions, and I will endeavor to answer all of them once we get through the agenda. Then Stephanie's going to talk about campus life, and then we'll circle back. I'll circle back and talk a little bit about course delivery for the fall. I want to start by saying that, you know, no one who wants to talk to parents or to potentially new students at a university wants to start by talking about public health, but that's the world that we live in right now, and it's been our #1 priority for over 14 months to deal directly head-on with the COVID virus, to build a layered defense against the virus that still allowed us to offer the best academic and campus experience that we could when we could offer a campus experience. And I think it's important to note that we've been very successful in that without creating an environment that we felt like might be regressive with regard to how the students would experience the campus or their academics. We're proud to say that during the entirety of COVID, We have not had a single contact tracing go back to any classroom on our campus. Unlike some places around the country, we did have a on-campus experience that started in the fall. When the virus surged, we made some choices about sending students home after Thanksgiving out of prudence for our ability to protect the students that were living on campus. We delayed students moving in the spring so that we could assure their safety, and they did move in. And so throughout most of this process, we have not been 100% remote. We have had people on campus experiencing those important academic experiences that can only be done in the classroom. And it is our goal in the fall to move that much closer to a pre-COVID experience than we even had in this past year. We'll talk a lot about that when we get to course delivery. With regard to the question of what are our public health restrictions, the two most common questions that we get right now are, will there be a mask requirement? And secondly, what does it mean that the CU system as a whole has come out and said that the vaccine is required? Let me deal first with the mask mandate. So the governor of the state of Colorado implemented a mask mandate well into the COVID pandemic last summer. We are still under that mandate, but the governor has said that depending on how vaccinations are going and how the caseloads are going, that he expects to remove that mask mandate on June 2nd. It is the case that we have followed local and state public health guidelines with regard to social distancing and masks throughout this entire process. And we expect that if those mandates are removed, that we would expect to walk backwards from some of those requirements in order to return to a more pre-COVID environment. So I want everybody to understand that we will follow our local and our state guidelines and that we believe that those are going to be removed. And for those of you that are thinking about UCCS for the fall, we want you to understand that right now we are expecting a situation where masks will not be blanket mandated. There may be some situations where we think they may be prudent, but we don't expect it to be as widespread as it is now. The second piece is the CU system's announcement that the vaccine would be a requirement. So I want to talk a little bit about why the CU system leadership believes that's important. It is the belief of our leadership that the vaccine is a key component to concluding the pandemic, and that it, along with other things, create a layer of defense against the virus that allows us to ensure the safety of our students, of our staff, and of our faculty. And so we endorse the vaccine. It is also the case that this campus in particular has prided itself on respecting individuals' decisions and individuals' values with regard to the choices that they make about a whole spectrum of personal choices. And so our take on what it means for the requirement is that we are going to ask for 100% accountability for our students, staff, and faculty on an attestation. And the attestation will simply ask three questions. Were you vaccinated? If you were not vaccinated, do you intend to get vaccinated? Or do you not intend to get vaccinated and want an exemption from the requirement? And the purpose of the attestation is for us to get a sense for the scope of how much of our population has been vaccinated, because we will use that in making choices about our public health guidelines in the fall. Quite frankly, if we are close to herd immunity, then we believe that we will be able to remove most of those restrictions. If we are not able to get to herd immunity, then we will have to consider the possibility of some health, public health restrictions in order to ensure the safety of our entire population. As many of you know, the virus is a wild card. And so the possibility that the virus could change over the summer or that any number of things could happen might mean that we might look at public health restrictions regardless of whether we know whether our population is vaccinated. But I want to make clear that the choice about the attestation and the idea of trying to get 100% accountability from our population, regardless of their choice, is more about how we plan to protect our population and is not in any way, shape, or form an effort to try and target individuals for their choice or to create a situation where people would feel targeted by that attestation. And the attestation really is very simple. We will not, as for the purposes of the attestation, we will not collect medical records. We are not going to require our population to walk around with a vaccine card that could be shown upon demand. We are not going to authorize supervisors or customer service agents or instructors to be able to ask an individual whether they've been vaccinated. The choice of vaccination is an individual choice. The safety of our population is our responsibility. And so the attestation is our way of ascertaining the status of our total population, not a single individual, and to then make the appropriate choices with regard to public health for the entire population. And I think that that's really important. I think that when we talk about a requirement, I think that some people react poorly to that. But I think that I think that the purpose, again, of the attestation is to protect the population and not to target individuals, and to allow us to make some good choices about how your students are going to experience the fall. And our goal is that they experience a fall that is much more akin to our pre-COVID environment than it is to the COVID environment. I know there are going to be a lot of other questions on that, and we'll entertain those in a few minutes, but I want to turn to a more positive light and let Stephanie talk a little bit about campus life.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. So I'm going to start talking about the residential living experience first, and then I'll go into kind of some of the other campus life. So our plan is to let the students move back into the residence hall. They will be allowed to have roommates. We did have quite a few students that actually have roommates this past year. We do still try to limit how many share a bathroom, just to make sure that we're providing the safest experience possible, but there will be more than one person in a room that is not a single. We know that we have a lot of students that wanted that on-campus experience, so we're doing everything within our power to provide that again. As Chuck mentioned, we will not be asking anybody for their records, whether or not they chose to be vaccinated or if they do the exemption outside of the attestation. What I will say is that we encourage anybody, especially if they're living in housing and they're a student, to consider uploading their immunization records, and it would go through the same portal that all other immunizations do. And the reason is because if we have somebody who's deemed to be a direct contact to somebody who tests positive, if it is a Thursday at 4:45 p.m. and we don't have access to somebody's records, and that student cannot provide us with any records before the health services staff is done for the day, we will have to move them from their room into a quarantine room, much like we've had to do this past year. So if somebody tests positive, we do pull them from their room unless they're in a single, but even at that point, a lot of them we put into an isolation room, and then direct contacts we put into a quarantine room. Those that are vaccinated will no longer be displaced from their room. They will be allowed to stay in their room because that is per the CDC. If you're vaccinated and you have an exposure, you do not need to go through the quarantine process. Those that are unvaccinated, though, will still be required by public health guidance that we will have to still follow all quarantine protocols. So that's why having those records will be helpful to minimize those that need to be displaced because we don't have access to records. Again, it's totally 100% voluntary. You don't need to upload them, but we're doing it in an effort to try to help make things as smooth as possible for the fall. Again, it doesn't matter if somebody's vaccinated or if they choose to do an exemption, they're allowed to live on campus. Nobody can ask what somebody's status is. So We've had some questions around whether or not you will know if your roommate is vaccinated. You actually will not. That is not public information. The only time that that information is going to come into play, again, is if somebody has a direct exposure to a positive case. The Wellness Center will do contact tracing, and then at that point, they will make the decisions on who needs to be moved and who will stay. Both of our dining halls will be open for the students. We have one in each village, so those will be available to everybody with full service, full meal plans, meaning they can even stop in there during non-meal hours, but we have a wide variety of meal hours where people can go in. We will also have to-go meals, and anybody that was in quarantine and isolation, we delivered all their meals directly to them once they were placed in quarantine or isolation. We are doing our best to provide the same experience we had pre-COVID, but we will still have some of these public health measures that will be in place. As far as other events, again, if somebody wants to go to, we have an event called Rec Fest at the beginning of the semester where a lot of students will come into the recreation center or Alpine Field. We'll do a lot of games, icebreakers. And so for those events, everybody is welcome. Again, the only difference will be if anybody is deemed a close contact at any events, we will do the contact tracing and decide if anybody needs to go into quarantine or if they can continue to go to all of their classes, work, and other events. So we are, again, trying to bring back as many events as possible. Our team is busy already planning events for the start of the semester, trying to keep students very busy from the day they move in and throughout that first week to really get them connected. Our move-in for housing, we are hoping to have it, we're planning, I should say, for it to be August 15th through 18th, with the majority being on the 16th and 17th, which is a Monday and a Tuesday. There will be limited openings on that Sunday, the 15th, and then the 18th is really meant to be for overflow for anybody that can't come on the other days. So it'll be a staggered move-in, but part of that is just to make it a more pleasant experience for everybody involved so that you have more time and more space so that you can do the move-in without feeling so crowded with so many other students there. And again, campus for the most part is open. Our campus recreation center has been open. Our intramural leagues, when we opened them up again, they all filled within the same night. So we doubled the amount of intramural leagues. We still have our club sports going. We are allowed to do trips again now that we can travel again. We have a lot of activities across campus. In a given year, we'll have 200 clubs. So lots of clubs have been starting to meet again. We've had a lot happen virtually, but now that things are starting to lift, we're able to do more in person. And the hope is that as our vaccination rates climb, that we'll be able to continue to offer more and more in-person experiences. So again, we will use what we see from the attestations to see where we're sitting at, and that will help guide the numbers that we can have at activities as well. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Chuck, if you want to talk a little bit about course delivery, and then we can open it up for questions.
Sure, thanks, Stephanie. So first of all, I want to start by saying that if any of you are watching this and you haven't signed up for orientation yet, one of the best things that came out of COVID that we learned was that we could provide through our OWLs, who are our student welcome leaders, the opportunity for your student to engage with them one-on-one to talk about registering for classes, what a major's like. And it turned out that had a really positive impact on the students who were considering joining us in the fall. And so we're continuing that, and we're likely to continue that even if we go back to a full in-person pre-COVID environment. And the reason that we will do that is that we found that the students really want to talk to another student, and they want to talk to another student that has, potentially a like experience to what they're looking at. So for example, in my son's case, he's a computer engineering major. His OWL was a MEC-E. And so he was able to spend a half hour talking with a student who was going into their junior year about what it was like to be an engineering student, what kind of classes to take, what were the hard classes, and to really talk about strategies for enrollment. And that has turned out to be an extremely valuable experience. So I would encourage those of you that haven't had a chance to experience that to look into it. So let's talk a little bit about course delivery. One of the ways that is probably the most powerful way for us to demonstrate that we are moving back toward a campus experience that is much more like the pre-COVID environment is to talk about course delivery. It is the case that in the fall, the percentage of our sections that were delivered in person or had an in-person component. For example, we use the term high flex frequently now, which is a class where a calculus class might meet 3 times a week, but only a third of the students are actually coming to the class. Or, one of the class periods is delivered synchronously by the professor and everybody logs in, and then the next 2 classes are all in person. And so in the fall, that was about 30% of what our course delivery looked like. For this coming fall, I'm happy to say that that number is at 70%. And so, in fact, it's really approaching the limit of where we were pre-COVID, because we've always had some online or asynchronously delivered courses. And that, I think, is a reflection of the faculty's commitment to trying to get back to that in-person experience that is so valuable in a number of subject areas. But we are also recognizing that there are some subject areas or some academic experiences where some sort of virtual experience coupled with the in-person experience can be very powerful. And so you'll hear our faculty talk a lot now about the new possibilities that they've learned in how they approach their pedagogy by utilizing some of these electronic tools. And so we are approaching 70% of our sections being in person or being high flex, which means that at least some in-person component. And we expect that number to increase back toward about the 90% level, because we always had about 10% online. Not sure what else to say about the course delivery. We are expecting all of our lab classes to be available, and a lot of our other classes that are really high touch that do require an experience. And I know Chris teaches this course, so maybe he could pop back in and talk a little bit about what GPS is going to look like in the fall. You're muted.
You would think after 14 to 15 months of Zoom, you'd figure out the mute button. I'm actually not teaching this fall. I've not been able to with just taking care of my daughter this year. But I think it's probably good to say when we talk about the idea of getting back to normal, right? Well, there is no normal. We're going to create a new thing moving forward, but the in-person experience is definitely coming back. And that's what we really want to speak to. But seminar, and when I have taught in the past, Stephanie, you've taught in the past too, my favorite thing about it is that it gives your student someone to go to when they don't know who else to go to. And I always looked at my 15 kids each year for the 8 to 9 years I taught in GPS. I'll probably get back in next year. Maybe I can get Linhart back to do that. As those are mine. Those kids are mine. Stephanie, you probably thought the same way. Like those 15 are my kids. And they just knew who to come and talk to. And that honestly still happens today. I still keep in touch with students that I had 8 years ago and just what they're up to in life, and just being a mentor. That seminar class is really helping them transition from high school to college. While some don't need it academically, some don't need it socially, they all need something in their own unique way. And seminar really meets them at their level at a point where it's really critical in that transitional phase in their life where they're just figuring out a lot about themselves. And so we work a lot on, basic college skills and just leveling those up. But sometimes it's as simple as I'm afraid to talk to my parents about this, or I don't know how to talk to my professor about that. And we have that conversation with them. But they are moving, the GPS classes are very much in person, not very virtual whatsoever, because we kind of need them to be. So, Chuck, Stephanie, I think you all nailed kind of the main points that we wanted to talk about. I think we got through the classes are in person, activities are in person. Stephanie, would it be fair to say that we'll have over 1,500 students living on campus this fall, do you think?
Yeah, when I checked with housing yesterday, we are pushing towards 1,500. We are having a huge response to freshmen wanting to live in housing. So we are actually going to be opening up more beds because it's become a very desired thing for our freshmen coming in, because this last year, there were some changes. And so I think a lot of people are wanting to come and experience living on campus. So we're looking at about 1,500 probably for the fall.
And we did put the link for the housing application into the chat. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. Chuck earlier referenced the connections that OWLs make with students. Orientation is that process to get through our process for class registration and working with the OWL on that class registration. So that link is also in the chat. We've got a couple questions in the chat that our behind the scenes team is answering a number of them that you put in. So they might not get answered live. They might just get answered directly to you. And I'm going to answer Pranav's right now because we just talked about housing. And that's housing decisions are constantly being made. We've already sent out one, if not two, housing assignment groups already. One, I think the second one is coming.
Yep, it's coming next week. End of this week or early next week.
And that's just a constant pattern up until, we're full. And I don't anticipate us being totally full until far late in the summer, probably close to move-in. So the question that our folks have asked to answer live right now is, I'm concerned that the COVID vaccine is not really a requirement and students can opt out, especially in the dorms. COVID cases in Colorado are very high at this time, so there is a concern for my son. Would either of you have a response just to that concern? And I can read it again if you would like me to.
I can start, and then I think Stephanie's our healthcare expert, so it might be important for us to kind of go over what the efficacy of the vaccine is. So this is, I understand the concern, right, that it feels like it's too easy to opt out. But remember, the goal here is for us to be able to understand what our population looks like so that we can make the appropriate public health care guidelines or put restrictions in place. If the predominance of our population is not vaccinated, then we're going to make choices much like we did last fall in order to ensure their safety. If we were closer to herd immunity, then I would actually say the concern is flipped, and that is our concern would be for those who chose not to be vaccinated. And that's based on what we understand to be the efficacy of the vaccine. And so it's important to understand our population, and I think Stephanie touched on some of the additional things that we would do in housing because we would have people living in close proximity to each other, and we want to make sure that we can ensure the health of those who are vaccinated and the health of those who are not. And I just want to kind of tip over to Stephanie and just say, can you talk a little bit about the efficacy of the vaccine and how well protected you think an individual who is vaccinated is, and how well an individual who is not vaccinated is protected?
Yep. So each vaccine has its own efficacy. So Pfizer's 96.1%, Moderna is about 95.1%, and the Janssen vaccine is about 72% to prevent from getting COVID. All of them run at about 99% to prevent serious disease and hospitalization and death. And that was the ultimate goal with this. So while even if somebody who is vaccinated gets COVID, it's meant to keep them from having a serious illness from it and being hospitalized from it. Again, Pfizer and Moderna have a very high efficacy rate from even getting it. So those that are vaccinated, that's why they don't have to quarantine, because their likelihood of getting COVID if they're exposed is extremely low at this point from all the research that's been done, as well as Janssen. And again, with Janssen, again, the likelihood that they would have a serious response is very low. So that is why we push the vaccine so much, because we know that if a student wants to come back to having an in-person experience, if they continue to get exposed to somebody who does test positive, those that are unvaccinated are going to continue to have to follow these same parameters. They're going to have to move rooms if they're living on campus. They're going to have all their meals delivered. They will not be allowed to attend work. They will not be allowed, in essence, to attend anything on campus. And commuter students cannot come to campus during that entire period, while vaccinated individuals would be allowed to. So that is a key difference that people need to understand. And to your point, Chuck, you know, if we had 40% that are vaccinated, it may be that there's only a limited number that can eat in the dining room together, that there's only a limited number that can share a table. We were very careful not to put any more students in rooms to share a bathroom than we did last year. So the difference for this year is that there will be more people that have roommates, but there will not be any more people in a room sharing a bathroom than last year. So we're following the same public health guidance to keep our students as safe as possible. And I will be honest, in the entire state of Colorado, we have the lowest ratio of student to bathroom of any college. So that's why we've been able to fill our residence halls, because our design is different than any other residence hall in the state. So that has been a huge benefit to us this year. So while other colleges, unfortunately, were in more of a bind because of some of those parameters. So, you know, we know that our students, some of them did get sick. We were very lucky with all of our residential students and our freshmen. We did not have any that had a serious illness from it. So again, we are taking this very serious, and we want everybody to be vaccinated, but we also are being mindful that we're taking all the precautions, but also giving them that in-person experience that they've been requesting, hoping that we can get about a 70% vaccination rate, which is where the country is kind of hoping we start to hit herd immunity. We watch the numbers in our county every day. I talk to the health department. I can't even tell you how many times a day. I talk to the state health department weekly, and we're in constant communication. We're offering vaccine clinics on campus at least 1 to 2 times a week. In the fall, they will ramp up even more again. We'll be offering vaccinations at move-in. If we start to see spikes, we'll put additional public health measures in place. But again, we're trying to move back to as much in-person experience as possible, being as safe as we can.
And to be clear, we want 100% of our population to be vaccinated. And we will make the vaccine available throughout the summer and even into the fall. Yep. You know, I don't want to understate that. It is also the issue that if the FDA were to approve the vaccine and take it out of its emergency authorization, then we believe we would be in a different situation, and the conversation would be much like the conversation is for the MMR, which is a part of the shot record that we require for students to enroll. And so, you know, there are a lot of things that are going to happen on the national scale that are going to set some pieces for us that you know, that may change, you know, how stiffly we want to mandate this. But the truth of the matter is right now we are concentrated on the safety of our population, and we believe that we will be able to get sufficient information with the attestation to make the kind of choices that kept our campus safe last year and will keep our campus safe this coming year.
The other thing I wanted to say too is that if once your student has gone through orientation and if they are registered for any classes, they are welcome to attend any of our vaccination clinics this summer. I know that they're open all throughout the county, but we are happy to vaccinate anybody that's enrolled in summer and fall classes. And we send out a link every Friday, so we are happy to share that with any student that would be interested. And again, we're offering them 1 to 2 times a week. So
hit a couple questions from the chat. And this is a kind of a reiteration of a comment you made in the beginning. And I think since we've had some people pop in, I think it's a good thing to remind. So the question was concerning, would there be different rules or guidelines for vaccinated versus unvaccinated students? Would students be penalized if they weren't vaccinated? Would you just reiterate what you said kind of in the beginning of this, that we're not treating anyone differently?
Yeah, I think, you know, the only specific example that is the one that Stephanie gave with regard to how we conduct contact tracing. and how whether a person is vaccinated or not will play into how we will deal with a positive case should it appear. We do not at this time intend to, have unvaccinated students wear masks in a classroom, for example. We would, depending on what we learn about our population, we would likely go to the type of capacity restrictions that we used last fall, and limit the number of people in there and use social distancing and use how we've set up our HVAC systems and how we've set up barriers and social distancing in order to keep everyone safe.
And then other question is, when will the attestation form be available? When is it due? Is there a vaccination exemption where the student can fill it out online as well? Like, do you have any insight to that process yet about what physically it looks like?
So we have completed the language of it, which is why I was able to say at the beginning, right, that it's going to be a very simple form. You will attest that you've been vaccinated, you'll attest that you intend to be vaccinated, or you'll attest to asking for an exemption. We are currently working on making sure that we can assure the data security of the attestation. And so the form will be available in the next couple of weeks. Our intent is for it to be completed prior to the fall semester so that we have sufficient time to put any public health guidelines in place that we need to based on the findings of the attestation. So when the form is made available, we will also then say what date it needs to be completed by.
A slew of just housing questions, and I'll just reiterate and kind of remind folks, with the housing move-in range of August 15th to August 18th, we will let the student know what their day and time range is to move in. People are allowed to help them move in. I'm not sure if there's a restriction. I think we kind of asked to try and keep it to 2, just because there's other people moving at the same time and just a lot of people in small spaces. But you will find out, I believe in July, when your move-in date and time is. They try and get that stuff out as early as they can, just in their planning process. But I would imagine sometime in July, you would find out when to come to campus, when to move in. We have people that also help. And so we try and make it a pretty fast process. Chuck is there sometimes. He'll move a fridge if you want. Stephanie will tell him to move a fridge if you want him to. So that's totally allowed. But that housing information move-in dates will come to you in July for when to move in. Just running through. So Stephanie made a comment, and this is a good one. Joe was wondering if it's unclear what the bathroom. We said we have a low student to bathroom ratio. Why do we have such a great low ratio?
Oh, because each suite, the way they're set up, does not permit more than 4. And even if there was a triple, we're making sure that there is no more than 4 people per bathroom. And the design of the entire housing village allows it. We have no community bathrooms where it's 4 floor, where most residential halls have that setting. We are very, very limited in the number of people that can share a bathroom. So it has been a huge advantage through all of this from a safety perspective. We also had measures in place in the dining facilities to restrict how many people were at each table so people could go together, or they could take food and go sit outside and distance themselves out there and eat with more people. So lots of options for everybody, but we really tried to have as many measures in place as possible.
Chuck, last year, or when COVID kind of broke and we had to leave campus, there were situations where we did some refunds for unused portions of things. That's always just kind of at the stress of the concern of the situation. Would you speak to just how we go about that process and what when we make those decisions?
Yeah, sure. So, and I saw that question in the chat, though I didn't get a chance to finish reading it, but it is the case that when we had situations where students needed to leave the dorm and they wanted to go home, either because we were going remote or for their own personal reasons, we had a process by which they could request a refund, and we were very liberal about allowing for those refunds. we want people to have a good experience. And, you know, when we have either had to inconvenience them because of the course of the virus or because they made that choice, we were pretty liberal with those refunds. I believe that we will use a similar process in the fall, particularly because, you know, the optimist in me says that we're going to be, you know, declaring victory against COVID by the fall. But we've all seen that, you know, just when we thought we were safe, things went south. So we will be prepared for that, and we will respect then people's request for refunds.
Just going through here.
Chris, while you're reading, I just want to say one thing too, because I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat. I know you guys are looking through the Q&A about why we allow some of the things. I have to say, so my role, I am a medical provider, so I prescribe medications for a lot of students that struggled with mental health and health issues, and I oversee our mental health services. Students being isolated in a room took a huge toll on their health and mental health, which is part of why we are trying to bring them the most comprehensive in-person experience in the safest way possible, because it's, while there's the health element to this, there is also a mental health element to this. And we feel it's our responsibility to address both issues, and providing them some of these opportunities to go to events again, to have a roommate, to join an intramural club, and to be engaged has been extremely beneficial for our students over these last few months, providing the little bit of opportunities we've been able to. So I just want to say again, we are not going rogue and having 2,000 people in a building, but we are allowing as many things as we're possibly allowed to within the scope of public health guidance, so that we can address the mental health issues we've seen over the past year as well.
I promised you that we'd try and keep this to about 45 minutes, and I have to put my 9-year-old to bed. So Stephanie, do you want to take, aside from that, do you want to make any other last comments? Good for the order, anything like that?
You know, I'm happy to talk to anybody that has additional questions. You can email me. My information is on the UCCS webpage. You can call me. Again, I can talk to you from a parent perspective, a provider perspective, the assistant vice chancellor perspective, but excuse me, we really want to provide each student with an experience that meets all their needs for this coming year. So please feel free to reach out if I can assist with anything.
Chuck, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think I'd like to speak to the parents, right? As a parent, you know, my son's experience this last year, I think, is indicative of what many colleges went through. He moved in last August into a suite of 4 people, 4 boys sharing a bathroom. I'm not worried about COVID. There's other stuff when 4 boys are sharing, but maybe we shouldn't go into that. Anyway, and he lived on campus until Thanksgiving, and then he moved home, and we, you know, we followed the refund request procedures. I don't get any special treatment because I'm wearing a coat and tie with the baseball diamond in the back here. And he moved through that process of this year in much the same way a lot of other college students did in their first year. He also didn't get to experience much of a senior year, right? It was all taken away from him right there at the point where you're really supposed to be enjoying it. Stephanie's right. You know, the stress and the anxiety on top of the threat, the physical threat of the virus has taken a toll on a lot of people. I know that we have strived to balance that over the past year, and we intend to continue to balance that. And we've been very successful in keeping our students, our staff, and our faculty safe, and delivering the best experience that we could. And we really do look forward to that being the best, safest experience this fall.
And one last thing I would say,
Please.
we only had, as of Friday, 368 total cases since we started tracking COVID, and the majority of those were commuter students that had not been on campus. So our ability to manage this while still providing the experiences that we could is probably one of the best situations across the country for a college campus. So because our students, our faculty, and our staff are very mindful of following the guidance that's given to them, but still enjoying the experiences that are offered to them. And I think that that is unprecedented.
Folks, I think if you have taken anything from this tonight, and we wanted to offer you more, assurance about what the fall semester looks like from a planning standpoint, from, a course delivery, from a campus health and safety, from an activities, and just that we think we're going to have something pretty great for students this fall. But if you don't take away anything from this, I hope that you do realize that we really do care, and that the two people on screen with me have very busy jobs, but still take the time to look at this from a parent perspective. And one, Chuck's son is a UCCS student. Stephanie's, one of your kids did go to UCCS. So you've been in multiple shoes. We do care. And that's why we're doing these things and giving this information in May and not holding it off and just relying on websites and emails. We'll still send those things. We still have websites that we update, our COVID-19 pages, all of that have those statistics and updates there. But we'll still keep in touch with you with updates as they come and just planning for the fall semester. So again, if you're a student or if a student listening, you've not signed up for orientation yet, that is the next step in taking that place within the Mountain Lion family and signing up for your classes this fall and things like that. So orientation is that step. Housing is still available. And again, we hope you got a lot out of this. We're just kind of cleaning up the comments, and they're just thank yous. And I would say that, Stephanie, Chuck, thank you so much for doing this evening. Chuck, I know you did a town hall earlier today, so it's kind of double duty on Zoom.
So did Stephanie. She was,
presentation.
yeah, she and I seem to be panel partners today.
But thank you so much for doing this tonight. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of the night. Congratulations to all the graduates. We really do look forward to seeing you on campus this fall. It's going to be nice to have a lot of bodies back on campus and seeing the excitement there again. But for all the UCCS, for the entire admissions team, for Chuck and for Stephanie, thank you so much for attending tonight. And we hope to talk with you soon. Thanks so much.